we're going to be giving a quick intro to Pivotal Spring Cloud products, as well as taking you through all the new things we've been working on in the latest versions. We've got a lot to get through, so I hope we can cram it in, but we will be sticking around afterwards, so please come and talk to us, ask us questions. I'm Gareth Clay.
I'm Bella Bai, and we're both engineers on the Spring Cloud Services team. So let's get into it. You've probably seen these slides before, but of course, is the sound getting weird? Cool. All right, we will touch on forward-looking features that based on our current best knowledge, and things may change as we learn more. Before we can talk about what's new in Spring Cloud's products, can we do a quick show of hands? Who are the current customers for Spring Cloud Services for PCF? Wow, we got a lot. But for people that don't know what is Spring Cloud products, we should probably explain what they are.
Right. And you'll have heard a lot about Spring Cloud today, so we should explain why we have such a similar name and how we're different.
So Spring Cloud is a collection of open source libraries that help Spring developers implement some of the most common patterns in distributed architectures. Just by adding some dependencies and annotations, we can quickly turn a simple app into something that will do a lot of heavy lifting for you in a very customizable way. It's very powerful stuff. If you prefer to have control over the implementation of these patterns, then using Spring Cloud libraries may be just what you want.
Yeah, but implementing the patterns is just one step on the way to production. So with Spring Cloud alone, you still need to build, deploy, secure, configure, and scale the apps that you create. And with Pivotal Spring Cloud products, we take care of all that for you. And we're fully integrated with Pivotal Platform. So just as you can CF push an application, you can CF create service, config service A, and we'll deploy one for you on demand. So we're kind of like Spring Cloud, the batteries included, platform integrated, ready to go version.
So let's do a quick recap of where we've come from before we get into the new stuff. We used to provide a single product called Spring Cloud Services for PCF. This provides 3 key services to apps running on Pivotal Platform. We have config server, service registry, and circuit breaker dashboard. All 3 of them are built on the open source Spring Cloud, Spring Boot, and Spring Security project. We will go into each service offering in more detail a bit later, but for now, let's just say all 3 of these offerings are fully integrated with the Pivotal platform, and we had to ask you to install MySQL and RabbitMQ so we can make use of those too.
Yeah, so let's get into the new stuff. The first thing to say is that we've had a slight name change. So Spring Cloud Services for PCF is now Pivotal Spring Cloud Services, although you'll often hear us just say SCS just because it's quicker. We've just released SCS 3.1 today, and lots changed in the version 3 series. One big change is that we've retired the circuit breaker dashboard service. We're going to get into why that is and what's replacing it later. But the main thing to say is don't panic. So we've made sure that SCS version 3 runs really well alongside SCS version 2, so you can still use circuit breaker dashboard and also get our shiny new stuff just by running the 2 things together. We've undertaken a complete re-architecture around new open source components. We've embraced reactive programming across the board with Project Reactor, and we've also pulled in the new App Broker project from Spring Cloud, which makes it super easy to build service brokers. The re-architecture means that we no longer need a message queue, and so you no longer need to install RabbitMQ just to use SCS. And we got a lot of feedback to say that our dependencies on other Pivotal products, like RabbitMQ and MySQL, make for a bit of a tricky installation process. So although we're still using MySQL behind the scenes in SCS 3, now we're bringing our own instance of it, so you don't need to install MySQL just in order to use SCS. We're also targeting later versions of Pivotal Platform. Where are we?
I have no idea.
There we So in our previous versions, we couldn't assume we were running on a version of the platform that included CredHub, whereas now we can. CredHub is the platform's native secret data store, and we've been able to leverage that to improve our security and add some new features as well. In particular, one thing we really want to point out is that this means we now no longer pass credentials using environment variables anywhere across the product, which is something we've wanted to get rid of for a really long time, but we didn't really have a way of doing it until now.
And lastly, we have a whole new product to announce, Pivotal Spring Cloud Gateway. We have released an alpha to collect early feedback, so any feedback is welcome. Please talk to us. Our gateway offering is based on the open source Spring Cloud Gateway project that was presented in the keynote today, and the talk before us also mentioned that. On top of the open source functionalities, our commercial offering integrates with the Pivotal platform to provide gateways on demand. We're going to talk a lot more about the gateway product later, but for now, let's just save the shiny new stuff until last.
Yeah, so let's move on and talk through what's new in the other services that we offer. So Config Server builds on top of Spring Cloud Config to provide externalized version-managed configuration to applications. One of the principles of the cloud-native 12-factor apps that we're all building is that there should be a strict separation maintained between configuration and code. So that allows you to take the same application code and deploy it many times, but reconfigured for different purposes and environments. And Config Server helps you do that, and particularly at scale. It lets you pull in config from different sources like Git, which means it can be version managed, or from other more secure sources if you're using configuration that contains secrets.
But we also had a customer that hits problems with Config Server at scale. And this is how it happened. First, say you want to store configuration in a Git repository. So you deploy a Config Server that connects to the upstream Git repository and pulls it down. Then you deploy a load of apps, which are clients of the new Config Server. Each time the clients request configuration from the Config Server hits the upstream Git repo and fetch the latest value. And this is fine. So you're living in the external configuration dream, and you start to scale, deploying multiple Config Server and multiple platforms. And for a while, everything is fine until it isn't. At some point, all those requests for config updates overwhelm the upstream Git server, and the Git server will go on strike.
Yeah, and we absolutely want you to be able to run Config Server at this kind of scale. So clearly, we needed to find a way to reduce the load on the upstream Git service. And the way that we've done that is to add more Git. So we've introduced a new system called Microservices. You get one Microservice instance per platform. And that's shared between all the config servers that you create on that platform. And really what Microservice is Git cache. So when you create a config server that points to a particular upstream, Microservice will create a mirror copy of that locally, and then that's what your config server is pointed at. So in that way, we've been able to hugely reduce the load that we place on upstream Git services, and everyone's happy again. With the old version of SCS, the team that hit this issue went and implemented this kind of solution for themselves. And it's awesome that they went off and did that, but we don't want anyone hitting this kind of issue at scale, so now everyone gets this for free in SCS 3.
Git is great for most configuration, but it's hard to use it to store sensitive data securely. It's possible to store encrypted configuration in Git. You could provide Config Server with a key in the previous version of SCS, and then that was used to decrypt the values from Git for clients to consume. But you had to do all the encryptions manually yourself. Another approach is to store all the secret config in the product that is designed for secrets. Config Server also supports HashiCorp Vault, and that works really well. If you have an instance of Vault handy, then you can have your Config Server to pull secrets from there. That's great.
Yep. So for SCS 3, we're maintaining support for Vault, of course, but we've dropped support for encrypted values in Git. Instead, we're leveraging the CredHub instance, which lives in the platform. So now every config server gets its own secure namespace within CredHub for storing its own secret config. And you get that out of the box with no setup required. And then you can add and remove your secret config using either our CF-CLI plugin or via config server's REST API.
Moving on, let's talk about Service Registry. Our Service Registry offering is based on the open source Spring Cloud Netflix and Netflix Eureka to provide dynamic service discovery between microservices. In the microservices world, we want our services to be able to discover each other so they work as a whole. The Service Registry pattern is designed to help with that. It's like a centralized phone book for services to sign up to be found and to find others. Simply with CF Create service, you will get a scalable and fully secured Eureka service instance deployed with care. And with bind service, the bound app can become discoverable and can discover others via the registry.
OK, but what if we need to handle more load? How does Service Registry cope with that?
Well, you can specify node count when you create or update a service instance, and the scaled service instances will become replicated peers of each other.
Right, so we should probably explain what peer replication is then.
Sure. So when the service registries are configured to be replicated peers, they will start exchanging everything they know about registered apps. And eventually, all apps can discover all apps. Did I click? There. OK. Happy. Service registries can do this to support more load and to even make services discoverable between data centers. The best part is, it's really easy to update our service registries to make them aware of each other as peers. And then they will be able to talk to each other securely.
But I remember in SES2 that you could only peer replicate between service instances with the same node count. But what if you have one service registry instance that has more load than its peers?
Well, that's not the case anymore in SES3. You can peer up service instances with any node count, and now it works fine.
Nice. Is there anything else that's new?
Yeah. We heard from our customers that peer replication payload can get really big when there are lots of services registered. So sometimes the peer replication times out. But now in SES3, we've made it really easy to change the timeout value. You can change it by simply updating the service instance.
And in SES2, we had a problem where if you configure peer replication before all the peers are available online, then they would never authenticate with each other.
So to reduce the setup complexity, we've introduced infinite retry in SES3. No need to wait for each service instance to be available online. They will keep pinging their peers until the peer is healthy. Then dynamically configure security and access control for all the future communication. Once peer replication is configured, all apps can discover all apps again.
Right, so moving on again, we need to explain why our circuit breaker dashboard service is going away. In previous versions of Spring Cloud Services, Circuit Breaker Dashboard built on top of Spring Cloud Netflix to aggregate and visualize all the metrics published from applications using the Netflix historic circuit breaker.
Can you quickly remind us what circuit breakers are?
Sure. So imagine this is our beautiful microservices architecture, and we've got an app which makes a direct connection to another app, and everything's good with this. But what happens if this app fails? Now the client app that depends on it is also in trouble. And if we're really unlucky, then other apps depend on that app, and now we've got a cascading failure on our hands. So let's reset this architecture and introduce the circuit breaker. The circuit breaker's job is to switch from accessing the failing app. When a fault develops in our app, it's our circuit breaker now which notices. The circuit breaker's job is to switch from accessing the failing app to a different implementation. And here we're showing it failing over to another application instance. But really, the failover behavior can be anything that you want it to be. So another common pattern is to return a request based on cache data, for example. But the point is that our client app is able to stay up and running in a healthy state, so disaster averted. While circuit breaker is in this open circuit state, it'll keep health checking the failing app in the background to see if it's safe to revert back to its closed circuit state. And if it is, it'll flip back. And now we're back to normal operation.
Nice. This sounds like a really important pattern for resiliency. It gives breathing space for recovery in the face of temporary failures. Please tell me this pattern is not going away.
Yeah, circuit breakers aren't going away anytime soon, but what is going away is the circuit breaker dashboard service that we used to provide. So circuit breakers are great, but would be really confusing to deal with without monitoring. So we used to provide this service offering which would aggregate all of your circuit breaker metrics together and display them in a dashboard so you could see what was going on. And the reason we've decided not to continue to support circuit breaker dashboard through SES3 and beyond is, like you probably would have heard in the last talk, if you saw it, is that Netflix has deprecated the open source Hystrix dashboard that we used to build on top of, and they're putting Hystrix itself into maintenance mode in favor of newer circuit breaker implementations. Spring Cloud Project's already adapting to this. If you saw Olga and Marcin's talk just before this one, they went into a lot of depth on how that's happening. If you missed that one, it's a great talk to go back and watch later. Like we said, though, there's no reason to panic just yet, since you can still get the circuit breaker dashboard service just by using Spring Cloud Services too. We just want to let you know where things are going.
Cool. So I understand I can still use circuit breaker dashboard from SES3. That's good for now. But what about the future? With circuit breaker dashboard going away, how will I visualize my circuit breaker metrics?
Yeah, well, the way forward we're going for is to make use of Micrometer, which is the instrumentation library that's used throughout Spring Boot. And Micrometer wraps many of the popular metrics visualization services out there. It gives you a lot of choice over how you consume your metrics. So you could send them to Datadog or New Relic or Prometheus, for example, with no lock-in.
So it's like SLF4J for metrics?
Yeah, that's how the Micrometer team describe it, and it's a really good analogy. If you've got an existing Hystrix-enabled Spring Boot app, then you can switch to start publishing metrics through Micrometer today just by adding a new dependency. It's a really easy change to make.
You mentioned a lot of metrics visualization products earlier. Is there anything like that on the platform?
There is, yeah. And this is where we think the future of circuit breaker dashboard is going to go. So this is a screenshot of Pivotal App Metrics 2.0 beta, which is due to go GA soon. Once you're publishing metrics through Micrometer, you can register your app to have its metrics consumed via the platform. And that gives you this really nice app metrics integration. It displays all the instrumentation from your apps as well as the logs in one place. And we're thinking about what it would take to make this a complete replacement for the previous circuit breaker dashboard service. There's still a few things that we need to add, in particular the aggregation of metrics across multiple applications, but we're working on it.
So a lot is changing about circuit breaker metrics and the dashboard. And I guess we don't have enough time to go through it all today. How can people learn more about it?
Yeah, so we've written a blog post where we've been able to go into a lot more depth. And there's a link to that, along with some other useful ones, in a slide at the end of the deck. So feel free to grab that later.
Cool. All the time cutting was to save time to talk about Pivotal Spring Cloud Gateway. As we mentioned earlier, our gateway products build on the open source Spring Cloud Gateway product that is fully integrated with the Pivotal platform to make it very easy to use. It's currently in alpha stage, so just keep in mind that some of the features we'll touch on are still under development for GA release.
Yeah, so since you're sitting here listening to this talk, we're guessing that you might be using microservices already. And as we all know, microservices are great. They help you go fast and scale up by breaking down complicated things into smaller, easier to manage parts which work together to get stuff done. And with lots of smaller services, it's a lot easier to pick the right language or framework for the job. But one downside of that is that you probably need to configure security and network policies for every single one of these different frameworks. And if you expose those directly to the outside world, then when things change on your backend, you'll need to update every consumer to make sure they still know how to connect.
Yeah, but external consumers shouldn't need to worry about this level of implementation detail. Imagine having to update a mobile app every time your microservices change. Are you imagining that? Did you feel the chill down your spine? Not only that, having to configure security for every service can be a real pain too. That's why an API gateway is a great help. With a gateway app as the single entry point to your domain, all these implementation details are well hidden behind the door. You can slice and dice your domain as much as you want, and consumers don't need to care who really handles the requests. And if there is any network policy required to access the internal domain, the gateway is the only piece that needs special network treatment. Then you can rely on the gateway to reach the apps behind bars with container-to-container networking.
OK, so let's say I have some microservices running on the Pivotal platform. How do I publish those through Pivotal Spring Cloud Gateway?
First, create a service instance. You can use the normal CF create service command, and then bind the microservice to the gateway instance. The only configuration we really need at this point is to know that this is a service to be published and the API path to route requests to. We can default a lot of information for you on your behalf. During binding, aside from setting up the additional route on the gateway instance, the gateway service broker also set up container-to-container network policy to allow traffic between the gateway and the bound app. This means that your microservices don't need public routes. They can be completely private, only accessible to the gateway. Once that's done, when the configured path is called on the gateway will forward the request to your microservice on the container network. And if you want to publish another service, you can just bind that service to the gateway too. Simple and easy.
Cool. But what if I want to publish some external APIs that don't live on the platform on my gateway too?
Targeting that use case, there is another way. You can pass in all the routes of your external APIs when creating a service instance, or you can update the gateway if you need to add more routes. Of course, you won't get a container-to-container networking since we're going off the platform here. But we just want to show you that it's easy to expose your APIs through the gateway, no matter where they live.
OK, so that's the networking bit. But what about that other microservices headache we talked about, where you have to set up security for each of those different frameworks? How can Gateway manage that for us?
Yeah, we've integrated our gateway products with the Pivotal single sign-on. We can allow the traffic through if the user or client is authenticated and has the required authorities, or reject the call if the caller cannot be authorized. This is really easy to configure using the custom SSO filters we've implemented. You can define behavior like redirecting unauthenticated user to the login page, or filter on required OAuth scopes.
OK, so this is sounding good now. But what about rate limiting? So that's a feature that had helped to protect against infrastructure attacks. So it's definitely a feature I want in my gateway. And I also want that to work at scale, so when I scale up my gateway instances. Is that something we're supporting?
Sure, if you ask for it. We're using an in-memory data grid to support rate limiting across a cluster of gateway instances. It works using the token bucket that's shared among all gateway instances. Requests consume tokens from a bucket. No matter which gateway node is actually forwarding the traffic, once insufficient tokens are available, all the nodes will start to reject traffic. Tokens are replenished steadily over time, so in that way, we can keep a cap on the rate of requests that are allowed through.
Right, so that's all of the services in Spring Cloud products, past and present, talked about. So we're going to wrap up by having a quick look into the future. So just really quickly, here are some of the features that we've got planned for upcoming Spring Cloud services and Spring Cloud Gateway releases. We're integrating RSocket to make things even more convenient and fault-tolerant. So RSocket, if you haven't heard about this yet, takes reactive programming principles and applies those at the network level. It's pretty amazing, and it's going to enable a lot of really interesting stuff. I think there are 2 talks on the schedule, one about RSocket in Spring and the other about RSocket in Spring Cloud Gateway. So if you're interested in learning more about RSocket, those are definitely ones to catch. We're going to be giving you more control over the refresh behavior in config server. So that's the refresh of configuration from your upstream source to config server. and also the refresh of config from config server out to your client applications. So RSocket makes things like pushing out instructions to update to multiple client applications at once really easy for us now. For Pivotal Spring Cloud Gateway, we're working on a brand new management console, and we'll be integrating it with Spring Cloud Services and Micrometer to make it even more powerful and easy to use. And Gateway is also going to be supporting applications which communicate via RSocket. And I've no doubt there's going to be more features coming as well. If there's one you don't see on the list and you want, then please let us know about it, and we'll see what we can do.
As well as all those feature enhancements, we're also working on expanding the platform landscape. You will be able to get a similar experience to not just on Pivotal platform, but also on Kubernetes distributions too. It's going to be really exciting to see where this takes us and to see what all of you will be able to build using Pivotal Spring Cloud products and Spring Cloud products as a whole across all these platforms. And that's about all for our talk. Last thing, we've got some useful links here. If you want to just check them out and do some homework afterwards, we're not going to forbid you, but enjoy the rest of your day. Oh, wait, there are some other talks you can either attend or watch later about RSocket and Spring Cloud. Our slides should be available soon, so you can grab a copy if you want to hang on this list.
Yeah, and that's all we have. Here are contact details if you want to get in touch. We thought rather than taking questions on stage, we'd either give you some time back if you want to get away, or if not, come and have a chat with us, because hidden down here, we've got the rest of the team, so we can maybe source some more accurate answers just by getting everyone involved. Hope that's all right.
All right, thanks.